Hello, everybody. Welcome to Everybody Matters, our Family and Friends edition. I'm Jill Catherine, the host of our chat, and happy to be here today. This is our live chat we do once a month to provide you with some resources, some information and insight into how to support your loved one, your family, or friend who could be struggling with an eating disorder, disordered eating, or body dissatisfaction. So we take this time each month just to give you some support. This chat, you can watch it live, you can watch it on your own time. We have a collection of videos available to you that have titles and bullets of what the conversation is about to let you know. And there's a whole collection that talks about eating disorders specific of setting up a treatment team, and to the conversations where we are today about sort of the daily ins and outs and insights and tips of what it means to be in recovery, what your loved one could be experiencing, and also how you can help support them. Different strategies, different insights. You know, the most important thing is that millions of people are affected by this disease, right? Your loved one is affected by this disease. It doesn't look the same for any of us. You know, the reasons that bring us to this disease are not the same. There's certainly common themes and challenges that those who struggle with this disease face. And those are the things that I address. These common general tips, insights. They might work for your family, they might not. I encourage you to explore, take what resonates, leave the rest, and just, the eating disorders are such a complicated mental illness, and there's stages of recovery for sure. And so I encourage you, you might be tuning into this, and depending on the stage of where your loved one's at, it could be really helpful depending, or it could not, right? So it might be a video that you come back to in 3 months, 6 months, a year later, could make a lot of sense for where your loved one's at today. So just know that that's a natural thing for you to tune in and be like, this isn't relevant to where our family's at or my friend's at. But in a few months, it could be. Or you could be tuning in and it's exactly what you need to hear. So we do our best, just try to meet people where they're at and provide these resources for you to tune into on your own time and to hopefully get some insight into what you need. So I want to sort of dig in deep here today about some of the things that we've been discussing here. Through our weekly chat. So every week we do a chat with those who are in recovery, and they're certainly at the stage of recovery where and it was actually we're talking about today, where they're at the stage of recovery where their behaviors are minimal enough to where their bodies are refueled enough to where their brain is functioning more cohesively, right? And being able to, the conversations that we're able to have, they're able to really engage in some mindfulness, having an awareness of what their fears are, their insecurities, what that critic in their head is saying. So those are the conversations that they're able to have based on that, where they are in terms of refueling their body and their brain. And so a couple of things I want to talk about today is this video is coming out in December, and so this is a holiday time, right? And so last month, right before Thanksgiving, we had our weekly chat was about how to survive the holidays. We we talked about some tips and tricks for those in recovery of how to survive the holidays. And I'd like to share with you what those tips for us were on how to survive the holidays and make you aware, right? So here were 5 things that we talked, for those who are in recovery, we talked about how to survive the holidays, and not just survive, but really thrive. And so here's what here's what we talked about, and see what you can do to help incorporate these in your relationship with your loved one and how you go about supporting them through the holidays. So one of the first thing we talked about is how it's okay, and oftentimes really encourage it, to stick with your meal plan. So during the holidays, it's a beautiful time for those of us who don't struggle with eating disorders or disordered eating to enjoy all different types of parties and celebrations and all different types of foods, and, we're sort of off that regular day-to-day, week-to-week schedule that many of us have around foods, just based on our work schedules and our life. We all have sort of routines. But during the holidays, we're doing much more celebration, much more food is a beautiful and a wonderful thing that we celebrate with. And so, especially during Thanksgiving, we talked about this, but even with, the end of year holidays coming up, there's a lot of celebration that includes all different assortments and selections of food that are different than our usual. And so for those who struggle with eating disorders or disordered eating, it could be really necessary for them to just stick with their meal plan during that time. And depending on where they are at their stage, in their recovery, but there can be a lot of shame for that person who's struggling to not feel like they can be part of the celebration. Because why? Because how often do all of us in those celebrations are encouraging everyone, oh, eat more of this, or have some of this, or try this, oh, I made this special dish. And it's our nature that we want people to take part in what we've created and what we're all sharing and tasting. And I'm asking you to have some awareness and some sensitivity that person who's struggling with the eating disorder, this is one of the most triggering times for them. And what we're trying to help those in recovery to learn is that they can still be part of social gatherings that might have a large food focus, even though that could be a struggle for them. We want to invite them still to the table. And if they are invited to the table and their plate has to look differently for their sense of mental health, then that is absolutely okay. And so for those of us who are supporting people in their journey of recovery, we're strongly encouraging them to reduce the shame of sticking to your meal plan. There's nothing wrong just because you're not participating in these holiday dishes. That's okay. Right here, right now, this is what you need for your health. There's no shame in that. And so I really encourage you and invite you to remove any language that could be invoking shame, and instead provide support and encouragement of absolutely, if your loved one needs to stick to their specific meal plan, and that they can still be at the table, they can still be enjoying the conversation, and that food does not determine connection, right? That whatever foods we're engaging in or not has no relevancy on our value and our place in that gathering. So that's a really important thing, and for you to really welcome the space without shame or stigma if they're sticking to their meal plan. That could extremely be an effective support tool for you to your loved one during the holidays. Second thing we talked about is for them is to realize that for those who are in a place where they don't have to stick to a meal plan, they can just enjoy these holiday dishes, that could be a very triggering thing of other different aspects of their eating disorder, and especially how in holiday time we could tend to maybe eat more than we usually do. And for those of us who don't struggle with this disease, we can find our balance with that. If we're eating a little bit more, we sort of find our rhythm with that and are okay with that. But for those who are sensitive for those whose brains, and that's really important, is that understand if you're struggling, those who struggle with this disease, their brain is highly sensitive to food intake in their body, right? Brain chemistry, and it's different for all of us. So The second survival tip is that holiday food is not something can be available to you all year round. I know there's certain special dishes that people make during the holidays, but the majority of holiday food can be found at any time. And so we just encourage that second survival tip is to remember that you don't have to have, there doesn't have to be a hoarding aspect, that you can listen intuitively to what feels good and not feel a need to eat as much as you can because it's only available now. You know, you're welcome to save stuff for later, and not feel like a scarcity of this food, because that could be a very triggering component. Thinking that there's only so much of it and I have to have as most I can right now because this is a limited holiday edition. Well, let's encourage a space where there's plenty to be had. We can save some for later, and to listen to really what your body needs, and to know you can always find a way to get access to this great holiday food another time of year, that it's not just the end all be all right now, because that black and white, that scarcity is really triggering. The third survival tip is that we really encourage those in recovery to learn how to use their voice during this holiday time to set boundaries in conversations, and to specifically learn how to pivot conversations. And so what does that mean for those in recovery, and what does that mean for you? So someone in recovery can very quickly, in these holiday times, get stuck in conversations that maybe someone is asking them very specifically. So how are you doing? How's your recovery? Or they could just be asking them very specific questions that they don't want to talk about. This could be something that happens to you. People are asking you very specific questions whether you struggle with the eating disorder or not, and you don't want to talk about it. We all have the right to not have a conversation that we don't want to have. We pivot that conversation. And so this is a tool that we talked about for those in recovery. If anybody in whatever social setting there is engaging them in something, a conversation they don't want to have, whatever the topic is, they can pivot that conversation by saying, thank you, I appreciate you asking that. I just don't really want to talk about right now. And then they ask a question. So how are you? What's going on for you? Pivot the conversation. So for you, being very specific in detailed questions about your loved one and where they're at can be a very difficult thing. More open-ended questions could be really more effective. How are you? How are things in school? Anything new at work you're working on? Any new things come up in your life lately that you're excited about? Just broad-based questions, right? That give them permission to decide, give them space to decide how they want to respond, right? And what they want to share. So it's really important for those in recovery to feel like they can use their voice to set boundaries and not get locked in. But I think all of us can use that pivot skill, right? Is to say, thanks for, I appreciate you wanting to know more, or I appreciate you asking, but I don't really want to talk about that right now. So what about you? Pivoting with a question to them. The fourth thing we talked about in another tip of surviving the holidays is we really encourage those in recovery is sometimes family gatherings could be really triggering, extended families, and there could be a lot of things happening in those dynamics. And every family has dynamics. And so we really encourage those in recovery to focus on one family member that they're really happy to see, really thankful to be able to, talk to that day. Because this feeling of overwhelm is a very common feeling for those in recovery and struggling with eating disorder, disordered eating. So we really encourage them to focus on just one person that day that could sort of ground them throughout the day. That if they're getting triggered and overwhelmed in a moment, they can focus on this, And so some of our folks in our chat talked about, seeing their niece or seeing their nephew or seeing an aunt or seeing a cousin. And so they could really use that as a focus point to ground them. So I share that with you, that, that could be just something that you're aware of, that how as a tool that they're using to help them go throughout the day. The fifth one, their last tool, was to focus on something they're thankful for, and to, we're going into Thanksgiving, and to focus something on they're thankful for, and to try to invoke that throughout the day. And as we go into the end of year holidays, our focus for them is to really focus on something you did this year that you're really proud of and you feel really good about. Because this end of year can bring up a lot of stuff. So, and I encourage you to engage them in that conversation and even within your family circle, of something you're really proud of throughout this year, and inviting them to share something that they feel really good about this year. Just one thing. Keeping it very simple. One thing that we feel really good about this year. And as simple as can be, and I know depending on your family structure or your friend right now, wherever they are, they might really struggle to find one thing that they feel really proud of. That one thing could be just being willing to get treatment. That one thing they could be proud of is them using their voice to say they needed help. It doesn't mean life is great today, but that's something to be very proud of. And so, as much as you can nurture and cultivate a space at the end of year during this time that focuses on, positive things, solution-oriented things, not on the suffering of the day-to-day that is the reality of this disease, but that can alleviate over time with treatment. But focusing on, movement forward, positive movement forward. And it's all in those baby steps. So just a quick recap of the 5 survival tools we gave to those in recovery, and for you to be aware of and to try to implement in your own way to support them. The first one was that really encourage them, if they need to stick with their meal plan during the holidays, support that. Reduce any shame around that language. Invite them to the table, even if if their plate has to look different than yours. So what? It doesn't matter. We want everyone to feel safe and that they have a place, regardless if they're going to participate in holiday food or not. Sticking to one's meal plan, it could be one of the best survival skills. Number 2, that reminding, remember that holiday food isn't a scarcity. We don't have to hoard it, that most of that food's available all year round. So encourage, intuitive eating, save food for later, allow that approach to, it's not black and white, right? We don't need to activate, binge aspects of eating disorder by saying, oh, we have to have it all right now. And no, eat what feels good, and there will be more later. So encouraging that. The third is encouraging them to be able to set boundaries in conversations with family members, and coaching them on how to pivot conversations. If they're approaching a conversation they don't feel like they want to have, they can say, thank you for asking, but I don't want to talk about that right now, and then follow up with a question. And then to focus on a family member that brings them joy, and to cultivate, a gratitude about one thing they feel good about that they accomplished for the year. This is for them to survive the end of these holiday events. So think about how that makes sense for your family or friend. Think about what you can do that encourages them sticking with a meal plan if that's what they have to do, or encourages them to eat intuitively, Or think about what you can do that you're not engaging them in very specific conversation. We talked about inviting these more open-ended questions. How you can help them to celebrate one thing they feel good about this year. One thing they feel good about. And setting that tone. So, a couple other things I wanted to share with you in this chat too was, and if you have any questions, feel free to type that into the live chat right here, and we can answer those questions. But one of the things in our weekly group that came up, that for those in recovery said that what would be really helpful if their family could understand. And I thought this was really good to bring to you all, is this person said that it would be really helpful if their family understood that we change through recovery. We're not the person we were before or during the eating disorder. We've become someone new. And that we're not the same person, that we change. And she said that it's been really difficult for her family to accept who she is today. They compare her a lot. Well, before you didn't like this, or before you weren't like that. And I get how we all do that. If anyone we know or love is changed or different, it's off-putting. We're disoriented. We don't really get it yet. We're kind of confused. And we judge them. We kind of, well, that's not who you were before. And we think something might be wrong. And beyond the judgment, if we just take that aside, here's the truth. To recover from an eating disorder, to have an eating disorder, there is something, some part of that person that's unfulfilled, that's not fully there, that is hiding, that is disconnected. There's a part of oneself that doesn't feel like they can be who they are, right? There's a hiding of the self. There's a part of ourself that we're hiding. And that we use food and pleasing and perfection and all these other strategies to sort of fill that gap. When we start to address the deeper issues inside of ourselves that are underneath the eating disorder, the disordered eating, the body obsession, when we start to dive into what those personal issues are for ourselves and how we can fill those voids in us internally without using these other coping mechanisms, we are going to change. And it's just science, it's practical, right? You're not going to be the same as what you were, right? Because you're going to be different. You're not going to be doing what you used to do to deal with those insecurities, worries, fears, doubts, stresses. You have to learn new skills. You have to discover new parts of yourself. You have to invite new parts of yourself to become alive and to step out of the shadows and to just be who you are. And that is going to look and feel like a different person. And that's not always easy to be in relationship with. There's some people in our chat that their partnership, their marriage is challenged by that, because they're used to their partner being one way, and once now their partner's learning to use their voice and no longer turning to the eating disorder, but actually dealing with what they're dealing with, it's different for their partner. It's different for their family. So change is going to happen. And that's inevitable. We can't escape it. I don't say it's easy. I don't say it's comfortable, but that's what's real. And that's what is going to happen. And we want that to happen. And I think that's why it gets so discouraging for those in recovery, is when they're changing and feeling a sense of, wellness and more healing and a sense of who they are. And that's different and might be difficult for their family member, or their loved one, or their partner, or their friend. Although that's difficult, they're feeling better. And you might be like, but this is different. And you might not like it right away because it's different. It's not what you're used to. So that dynamic gets hard. And that person in recovery just wants to be accepted by you and loved by you. And you're struggled because you're different. So it's a complicated dynamic. I don't say it's not. But all I can do say is that was brought up by those in recovery that said, we just wish our family knew that change is part of the process, that they'd be open themselves to it, and to accept who we are today. That's the definition of unconditional love. That the conditions of our love may change. We might be different people, but that you accept us for who we are. So, easier said than done, but this is a truth and something to bring to your attention. And the last thing that I wanted to share today, and this was kind of one of our survival tips, is one of the things another person in recovery said that is really helpful for family and friends when they want to check in with us who are struggling, and we really appreciate you wanting to check in, is checking in with open-ended questions. Instead of, how was your meal plan this week? How are you? How was work this week? How'd things go at school? Broader questions, right? That give those in recovery permission to just sort of bring themselves to a conversation, as opposed to making it all focused on the nuts and bolts of the eating disorder, right? And all of our, like I started this conversation, all of our situations are different. And one of the most important things, and we have videos about this, is that those who are stuck with the eating disorder need a treatment team, and that as a family member or a friend, you're a support of the team, but you're not the clinicians, right? So your role could look a little different if your loved one is adolescent, but if not, your role is support. So checking in with general open questions is one of the requests a woman in recovery had said is really helpful when her family and friends do that. So today I leave you with some tips on how to support your loved one through the holiday by sharing insights of what they're going to work on for survival skills. And we talked about how change is inevitable through the recovery process, and for you to think about how you respond to your loved one changing. Notice yourself to that. Notice if you're resistant, how you can be flexible and allow room for change, and being willing to reach out and stay connected and checking in with more open-ended questions. So I wish you a wonderful end to this year, and I hope you enjoy the holidays, and I hope you take care of yourselves through this, and you can find some ways to love and support your loved one. So be well. We'll see you in 2018. Thanks.